I arrived in Korea carrying a quiet kind of excitement, the kind that does not shout but sits deep in the chest and whispers that life is about to open up. I had imagined clean beginnings, new routines, new confidence. I believed that once I landed, everything I had worked toward would finally make sense. At the airport, everything looked efficient and composed. Signs were clear. People moved with purpose. The trains arrived on time. Even the air seemed ordered. I told myself this was a good sign. A place like this would reward effort. I believed that if I followed the rules, learned the language, and stayed focused, I would belong sooner than expected. The first few days passed quickly. Jet lag mixed with curiosity. I walked through neighborhoods just to watch life happen. Convenience stores glowed at every corner. Cafes were everywhere, quiet and precise. People bowed slightly as they passed one another. There was a calm I admired. I took photos of street signs I could not yet read, and promised myself I would understand them soon. Hope is powerful in the beginning. It filters everything through possibility. Even confusion feels temporary. Even silence feels manageable. Reality began to shift during my first full week. It was not one dramatic event. It was a series of small realizations that arrived without warning. On the subway, I noticed how easily conversations flowed around me while I stood still inside my own thoughts. Laughter moved quickly. Announcements echoed in a language I was still learning to catch. I realized how exhausting it was to constantly listen, translate, and doubt whether I understood correctly. At first, I smiled through it. I told myself this was normal. Everyone struggles in a new country. This is what growth looks like. But the smiles became heavier to carry. The first time I tried to ask for help, my confidence faltered. I practiced the sentence in my head before speaking. When the words came out wrong, the response was polite but distant. No frustration, no kindness either, just efficiency. I walked away knowing I had been understood only halfway, and that half would have to be enough. That was when I noticed something I had not prepared for. Korea does not announce its boundaries. They exist quietly. You discover them only after you step too close. People did not ask where I was from out of curiosity. They asked to place me somewhere they could understand. When my answer did not fit neatly, the conversation usually ended there. Not unkindly, just conclusively. I became aware of my presence in new ways. In shops, on buses, in classrooms. I noticed how often eyes lingered just a second longer than necessary. I heard compliments that carried surprise inside them. You speak Korean well. You are so calm. You do not look like what I expected. Each comment stood alone. Together, they formed a pattern. I had prepared for cultural differences. I had prepared for language barriers. I had not prepared for the quiet awareness of always being seen before being known. Even simple tasks required energy I had never accounted for. Reading labels, understanding tone, knowing when to speak and when silence was expected. I realized that confidence drains faster when every interaction feels like a test you did not know you were taking. Loneliness arrived in unexpected places. It showed up in crowded spaces where no one noticed me. It showed up in evenings when the city lights reflected beautifully off buildings, but there was no one to share the view with. It showed up in conversations back home when people assumed I was living some dream version of life abroad. I told them I was doing well, because parts of that were true. What I did not say was how often I questioned myself, how often I replayed conversations in my head, how often I wondered whether my presence would always feel temporary, no matter how long I stayed. There was a particular night when the weight of it all settled in. I stood at a crosswalk waiting for the signal to change. People lined up neatly beside me. No one spoke. No one looked around. When the light changed, everyone moved at once. Perfect timing, perfect order. I crossed with them and realized something quietly unsettling. I was participating, but not belonging. That distinction mattered more than I expected. Up until then, I had believed that time alone would solve everything. Stay long enough and the edges smooth out. Learn enough and the distance closes. Work hard and acceptance follows. That night, I understood that effort does not always equal connection. Korea had not rejected me. It simply had not made space for the version of belonging I imagined. And I had not prepared for the grief that comes when expectations dissolve slowly instead of breaking all at once. Still, I told myself this was only the beginning. Stories do not reveal their meaning in the opening chapters. Growth rarely announces itself clearly. What I did not know then was how. Deeply, this experience would begin to reshape my understanding of identity, resilience, and home. Winter arrived before I understood how lonely a city could feel. The cold in Korea did not rush. It settled in layers. It crept through gloves, climbed into shoes, and lingered long after you stepped indoors. Streets stayed busy. Lights stayed bright. But something about that season stripped away the illusion that movement equals belonging. I learned quickly that you can be surrounded by people and still carry your days alone. The language barrier grew heavier over time. At first, it felt like a puzzle. I memorized phrases, practiced pronunciation, smiled through mistakes. Later, it became a wall. Simple errands turned into exercises in patience. Asking for help felt risky because misunderstanding came easily. Silence became safer than speaking wrong. Over time, I spoke less. Not because I had nothing to say, but because explaining myself took energy I did not always have. Work life brought its own lessons. Expectations were clear, but unspoken rules shaped everything. Hierarchy mattered. Timing mattered. Tone mattered. Being different meant being noticed, even when you did not want to be. Some days I felt invisible. Other days I felt exposed. I learned to observe before reacting, to listen more than I spoke, to measure my presence carefully. There were kind people along the way. A coworker who explained things quietly without embarrassment. A shop owner who learned my order. A stranger who slowed their words when they saw confusion in my eyes. These gestures did not erase the hard parts, but they softened them. They reminded me that belonging often arrives in fragments, not all at once. The hardest adjustment was internal. Back home, my identity came with context. In Korea, I had to define myself repeatedly. Where are you from? Why are you here? How long will you stay? Each question carried assumptions I did not choose. Some days I answered politely. Other days, I carried the weight of being reduced to a category. There were nights when I questioned my decision to stay, not because Korea was unkind, but because the version of myself I brought here did not yet know how to live this life. I missed being understood without explanation. I missed laughter that did not require translation. I missed ease. Still, something changed as the months passed. I stopped measuring my experience against my expectations. I stopped asking when things would feel normal. Instead, I focused on learning how to live within the reality I had chosen. I learned routes that felt familiar, cafes that welcomed lingering, parks where I could breathe without thinking. I learned that routines create safety when certainty is gone. I also learned resilience in quiet ways, not the dramatic kind, the kind that shows up when you choose to stay present even when nothing feels settled, when you allow growth to be slow, when you accept that adaptation is not linear. Korea taught me that migration is not only about geography, it is about identity. You lose parts of yourself. You reshape others. You discover strengths you did not know you needed. Some days you feel proud. Some days you feel tired. Both can exist at the same time. If someone asked me now whether I regret moving, I would pause. Not because the answer is unclear, but because the question misses the point. This journey was never about comfort. It was about becoming someone who could carry complexity without breaking. I arrived in Korea full of hope. That hope was not misplaced, it was incomplete. No one prepared me for the internal work required to stay, for the patience, for the humility, for the rebuilding. Far from home, I learned that belonging is not always given. Sometimes it is built slowly, through presence, persistence, and grace toward yourself. And that lesson stays with you, wherever you go next. This channel shares real experiences of life, identity, and belonging far from where people began. If stories like this speak to you, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. It helps this space grow and helps more people find stories that feel familiar. Thank you.